The sun dipped low over the fields, painting the horizon in streaks of orange and blood red. Eli, the old farmer, leaned against the wooden fence, his hands rough and calloused from decades of toil. A chill wind whispered through the corn, rustling the tall stalks like soft, warning voices. He stared at the horizon, his eyes squinting against the dying light, sensing a presence he could not name. The village children had long gone home, their laughter fading into distant echoes. Eli knew tonight was different. The ground beneath his boots felt heavier, almost as if the soil itself was holding its breath. He walked slowly toward the barn, each step pressing against the creeping sense of unease. Inside, the hay smelled faintly of earth and something older, something sour. A lantern flickered in his hand, casting shadows that twisted along the walls. He reached the far corner of the barn, where an old chest lay hidden under tattered cloth. Eli's fingers trembled as he lifted the cloth, revealing the object he had kept secret for years. It was small, wrapped tightly, yet it emanated a weight far heavier than its size suggested. He remembered the promise he had made decades ago, a promise whispered only to the night. The promise that had guided every choice he had ever made. Tonight, that promise would finally reveal its truth. As he unwrapped the object, the lantern wavered, sending a shiver of fear down his spine. Inside, there was a bundle of letters, yellowed with age, bound by a faded red ribbon. Each letter carried a name, a memory, and a warning he had ignored far too long. Eli's heart thudded against his chest as he read the first line, the words etched into his mind with cold precision. The letters were not addressed to him, but they spoke directly to him, revealing secrets no one had dared share. The truth was heavier than the harvest he had carried all his life. It told of betrayal, of choices made in darkness, of lives altered by a single, unspoken act. Eli staggered back, the lantern clattering to the ground and throwing shadows wildly across the barn walls. He had thought he was protecting something, keeping a promise to honor life, yet he had been guarding a lie. Outside, the wind rose, howling through the cracks of the barn like the voices of those long forgotten. A sudden memory pierced him, sharp as a knife, the face of a neighbor, pale and accusing, standing at his gate so many years ago. He had dismissed the warning then, thinking it childish, thinking it would fade with time. But time had only buried the truth deeper, letting it fester in silence. Eli sank to his knees, clutching the letters, the weight of decades pressing into his chest. The sky had darkened, and the first stars flickered into existence, cold witnesses to his revelation. He realized with a crushing clarity that the promise he had kept was not a promise of hope, but a chain of hidden guilt. A memory returned, vivid and unforgiving, a scream carried across the fields on a stormy night. He had not been there. He had turned away, convinced the world could not trust his judgment, convinced that someone else would intervene. And now, all these years later, the consequence of that choice clawed at him like a living thing. The wind lifted a corner of the barn door, rattling the hinges, revealing the shadows of the fields beyond. Eli's eyes traced the familiar path he had walked countless times, each step now tainted with regret. The letters trembled in his hands, their edges brittle, each word echoing the finality of his failure. He had promised protection, yet he had failed the very people who had trusted him. And the truth he finally held was too late to undo the past. A distant cry pierced the night, sharp and haunting, carrying with it the realization that some truths cannot be reversed. Eli pressed the letters to his chest, the barn around him trembling with the weight of decades of secrets. His breath came in shallow gasps, the air thick with the scent of earth, sweat, and inevitability. He sank fully to the ground, the lantern lying broken beside him, shadows swallowing the corners of the barn. For the first time, he understood that promises made in good intention could carry consequences far beyond imagination. Outside, the wind carried whispers of the lives affected, of the trust betrayed, and of the fate sealed long before his eyes could see it. Eli's hand fell from the letters, and the silence of the night became unbearable. In that silence, the truth settled, unyielding and complete, marking the end of hope and the weight of finality. The stars blinked coldly above, indifferent to his sorrow, indifferent to the lifetime of choices leading to this moment. The fields beyond the barn seemed alive, breathing judgment, pressing in with the memories of what could never be changed. Eli's eyes closed slowly, tears mixing with the dust of the barn floor. And for the first time, He felt the heavy, undeniable presence of the life he had failed to protect. The letters lay between him and the world, the final testament of his promise, a promise fulfilled only in the revelation of its cost. A crow cawed from the distant tree line, sharp and unforgiving, a final reminder that some truths only arrive when it is already too late. The barn door swung wider in the wind, the hinges groaning like an old man in pain. Eli's head lifted slightly, the sound of movement in the darkness catching his attention. The shadows beyond the lantern flicker seemed to twist, forming shapes that should not exist. A figure appeared at the edge of the field, half hidden behind the corn. Eli froze, heart hammering against his ribs. He thought it was impossible, a trick of the fading light, yet the shape moved with deliberate intention. The air felt thicker, pressing down on him, each breath a struggle. He tried to rise, but his knees refused to obey, weak from shock and years of silent torment. The figure stepped closer, and a chill ran through Eli's bones, sharper than any winter frost. Then he recognized the face. It was the face of a boy who had vanished decades ago, a boy whose disappearance had been blamed on the forest beyond the village. Eli's hands shook violently. He remembered the night clearly now, each detail he had buried deep inside. The boy had been his responsibility, left in his care for a single day. A sudden shout had echoed from the farmhouse, demanding his presence. He had turned away, and the boy had vanished. The figure's eyes glowed faintly in the dark, reflecting pain, accusation, and a kind of silent understanding that chilled Eli to his soul. He wanted to speak, to explain, to beg, but no sound escaped his lips. The letters slipped from his grasp, fluttering to the floor like dying birds. The figure stepped forward, and with each step, the ground seemed to tremble, the barn groaning as if it too recognized the weight of the truth. Eli's vision blurred, the flickering lantern casting grotesque shadows across the walls. The boy's lips moved, but the sound was not words, it was a wave of memory, of emotion, of unspoken condemnation that Eli could feel in his chest. Guilt pressed down like a stone, heavier than any harvest he had carried, heavier than the truth he had unearthed. A cold wind surged through the barn, extinguishing the lantern, plunging the space into darkness. In the blackness, Eli could feel the presence drawing nearer, cold and unrelenting. He fell backward, hands outstretched, grasping nothing but air, dust, and regret. The letters lay open on the floor, their words now seeming to twist, as if alive, mocking him, reminding him of promises broken. Outside, the fields rustled violently, the corn bending like waves in a storm, though no storm had come. The boy's figure flickered, shifting between human and shadow, reality and memory, a reflection of the life that had been lost. Eli tried to speak again, finally finding his voice, but it was weak, hoarse, swallowed by the oppressive night. "I kept the promise, I thought I protected them," he whispered, barely audible, yet the words felt hollow even to him. The figure stopped, hovering just at the threshold of the barn, and Eli felt a presence so heavy it crushed the air from his lungs. A sound like cracking timber filled the space, deep and resonant, vibrating through the floorboards and into his bones. The lantern, forgotten on the ground, burst into light suddenly, casting a harsh glow on the boy's face. It was neither entirely human nor entirely spirit, a blend of grief and anger, innocence lost and vengeance denied. Eli's stomach twisted in revulsion and fear. He realized then that the truth he had uncovered in the letters was not the full extent of what had been lost. Each secret he had buried, each choice he had made, had multiplied into consequences beyond his imagination. The boy stepped closer, and Eli could see faint outlines of others behind him, more shadows, more lives tied to his failure. Farmers, neighbors, children whose names he had forgotten, all appearing like echoes from a past he could not escape. The air was cold now, biting at his skin, filling his lungs with icy despair. The letters on the floor trembled, pages fluttering violently as if caught in a storm that existed only inside the barn. Eli tried to rise again, desperation fueling his body, but his limbs refused, weighed down by years of guilt and sorrow. The figure of the boy extended a hand, and Eli saw the faces of all those lost reflected in it, a mirror of pain he could no longer deny. The ground beneath him shifted, the barn groaning like it was alive, a witness to the revelation unfolding. Eli screamed, a raw sound of anguish that tore through the night, but the shadows only grew closer, surrounding him in the flickering lantern light. The letters lifted from the floor, circling him like birds caught in a whirlwind, their words now chanting accusations he could feel in his very soul. The boy's eyes glowed brighter, not with malice, but with the weight of every promise broken, every life abandoned, every truth hidden too long. Eli understood at last. The promise he had made so many years ago was never just a vow, it was a responsibility, a thread connecting the living to the lost. By ignoring it, he had allowed darkness to fester, to grow into something alive, something that had waited patiently for reckoning. The shadows leaned closer, pressing into him, filling the barn with whispers, cries, and the cold, unmistakable scent of inevitability. Eli's knees hit the floor again, and tears streamed freely, wetting the dust, wetting the letters that had revealed everything too late. The boy's face softened, just slightly, and Eli felt a moment of clarity amidst the storm. It was not hatred he faced, it was the truth, unflinching, undeniable, inescapable. The barn seemed to pulse with the weight of decades, every creak and groan a reminder of time lost, and choices made. The lantern flared, casting long, dancing shadows that twisted the letters into shapes Eli did not recognize. He whispered a prayer, though he no longer knew if prayers could undo what had been done. The letters fell once more, drifting gently to the floor, each word burning into his memory. Outside, the wind quieted, the field falling still, as if waiting for a final resolution. Eli bowed his head, feeling the crushing weight of the farmer's promise he had finally understood in full. He had protected no one. He had saved nothing, and the truth he now held was a cold, living entity, waiting silently for the world to acknowledge its existence. The boy stepped back, merging with the shadows, leaving Eli alone in the dim glow of the broken lantern. The silence that followed was not peace, it was the presence of consequence, watching, waiting, unyielding. Eli reached out to the letters, now lifeless, their truths fully revealed. He understood there would be no undoing, no redemption, only the endless echo of promises kept too late. And in that moment, with the first hints of dawn touching the fields, Eli knew that some truths carry a weight no lifetime can bear. The barn door creaked gently as the morning light touched it, revealing the stillness of a man who had finally faced the consequences of a lifetime. Outside, the world moved on, oblivious to the reckoning that had occurred in the quiet of the old barn. Eli remained on the floor, the letters beside him, the weight of his promise pressing down with every heartbeat. The fields were silent, yet alive with memory, whispering of all that had been lost, all that could never be reclaimed, all that could only be acknowledged too late. And in that silence, Eli felt the final truth settle upon him, cold, undeniable, and eternal. The wind rose once more, carrying with it the faint sound of the boy's laughter, or was it a cry? Eli did not move, did not speak, did not breathe more than necessary. He had kept the promise, finally. The world would never know the cost. And the truth would remain, waiting for the next soul to stumble upon it, waiting for the next reckoning, waiting for another promise left unfulfilled. The first light of dawn seeped through the cracks of the barn, soft and pale against the darkness of the night that had just passed. Eli remained on the floor, the letters scattered around him like fallen leaves. He no longer felt fear. Only the weight of understanding, the heavy stillness of a lifetime of choices laid bare. The fields outside swayed gently in the morning breeze, alive with the quiet rhythm of a world that moved on, indifferent yet patient. Eli rose slowly to his feet, hands trembling, eyes red from tears that had long been held back. The boy's figure had vanished, leaving only a faint warmth in the air, a silent reminder that the truth had been seen and acknowledged. He gathered the letters carefully, placing them back in the chest as if laying memories to rest. Each one was a testament to lives touched, promises made and broken, a record of the consequences that had shaped him. For the first time, Eli felt the weight of the final promise shift, not as a burden, but as a lesson. The reckoning was over. Outside, the birds began to sing, their voices gentle but insistent, carrying the quiet hope that life continues even after loss. Eli stepped out of the barn, the morning sun warming his face, casting long shadows across the fields he had tended for decades. He breathed deeply, inhaling the crisp air, tasting both sorrow and relief. The past remained, unchangeable, but he carried with him the knowledge of its truth. He would live the remainder of his days with honesty, with awareness, with the memory of those he had failed guiding his every step. The farm was silent now, not in menace, but in calm understanding. Eli looked at the horizon, the orange glow slowly fading into gold, and he whispered a final word, quiet yet firm, to the wind. "I remember. I will not forget." And in that moment, the fields seemed to breathe with him, the earth itself acknowledging the resolution of a story that had begun in secrecy, burdened by guilt, and ended with truth. The barn stood still. Behind him, a witness to the night that had changed everything, yet alive with the quiet hope that even in the darkest moments, acknowledgement brings peace. Eli walked slowly toward the rising sun, the weight of the final promise lingering but no longer suffocating, a memory transformed into wisdom. The world awaited beyond the fields, full of life, full of the unseen, full of the possibilities that come when one finally faces the truth. And though the shadows of the past would never fully leave him, Eli carried on, a farmer who had learned the cost of silence and the enduring power of honesty. The dawn held him gently, the warmth of a new day promising that even the heaviest of burdens could be met with courage and acceptance. The farm was quiet, yet alive. And Eli's story, once marked by secrecy and fear, now ended with clarity, with peace, and with the final promise fulfilled in understanding.